It's a celebration of America's freedom. Welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. The Mark Scaringi Show is your place for a weekly discussion on making America great again. The important political and legal issues of the day, a celebration of the Constitution, and traditional American values. Mark is a practicing attorney, a former senatorial candidate, a Donald J. Trump-endorsed delegate, and a defender of the Constitution. His goal? To put America first. And now, celebrating America's freedoms, here's attorney Mark Scaringi.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for our weekly discussion of the important political and legal issues of the day. You're welcome to call in at 717-540-0580, 717-540-0580. You can send me a tweet at Mark Scaringi, and I'll read your tweet on the air. For all my columns, prior podcasts of the show, and some merchandise, you can check out the MarkScaringiShow.com website. And today we're broadcasting on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live once again. Well, it's been quite a week in Washington, D.C. The nation has been focused on the drama that has become the Judge Brett Kavanaugh Senate Judiciary Committee hearings. The Republicans agreed to convene another hearing in order to hear from Kavanaugh's accuser, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, and the judge himself. And after a lot of back and forth between the legal team of Dr. Ford and the Senate Judiciary Committee, they agreed on the parameters, and the hearing commenced on Thursday. It was a long day affair. It was many, many hours, I think 9 hours altogether, and it was watched by about 20 million viewers live on television. And Dr. Ford testified first, and I'm sure most of my listeners listened in and watched and heard Dr. Ford's testimony. And I'm interested to know what you think about Dr. Ford, about her testimony. How did she do? Was she credible? Was she telling the truth? Call in and let us know at 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580, and you can comment also live on Harrisburg 100. And we'll read your comments and try to communicate with you in that way. But it was quite an episode. You know, many people say that Dr. Ford testified very credibly, that she was convincing and appeared to be very sincere in the allegations that she raised. I don't know about you, but to me, I think she appeared somewhat damaged, a little odd, she seemed at times a little cheerful and a little giddy. At times she was crying. It didn't appear to me to be the slam dunk that many talking heads have concluded that it was. There were gross gaps in her memory, in her recollection, and thus in her testimony. Part of her testimony lacked any credibility whatsoever. What about her explanation for why every witness she identified as being there in the party actually denied they were there, denied knowing about the party, denied being at the party, including her best friend, Leland. And that, to me, was the most incredible part of Dr. Ford's testimony, or at least one of the more incredible parts of her testimony. Dr. Ford claimed that her best friend at the time, Leland, was there at the party, but has denied it, and Dr. Ford posed an explanation for why her best friend denied being at the party, denied knowing Brett Kavanaugh, denied any knowledge about this alleged sexual assault. Dr. Ford claimed that was because Leland has significant health issues. Think about that. How does, first of all, Dr. Ford claiming that her best friend at the time, Leland, currently has significant health issues that preclude her from being able to recall this alleged sexual assault at a party 36 years ago? How does a medical issue prevent that recollection. That to me is a little incredible, if you ask. And it seems as if Dr. Ford is testifying that her best friend at the time, Leland, had some sort of mental health issue. That perhaps that's why Leland was unable to corroborate the Dr. Ford's account of Leland's presence at this party where this alleged horrible sexual assault occurred. I think that's not only incredible testimony from Dr. Ford, but somewhat hurtful and harmful toward her best friend Leland. That to me is it's bordering on a shameful stunt or tactic by Dr. Ford. Dr. Ford also testified she didn't know who was paying her lawyers, who were sitting to her left and her right, and who have been in probably near constant contact and communication with her for the past week or two. She claims she doesn't know who paid for the polygraph exam. It seems to me perhaps she's being led around by her resistance lawyers and these Democratic senators. I mean, how do you not know that who's paying your lawyers, who you've been working with for a week or two in advance of this hearing? And interestingly, she talked about how there was a GoFundMe pages plural, that had been set up to raise money for her, and that she didn't know much about them. She didn't know how to manage them. So she didn't set them up. Who set them up? And who's managing this money that's being raised? These GoFundMe accounts, apparently she's raised over $900,000 so far. Her lawyers, however, stated on the record that they're working pro bono. So if her lawyers are working pro bono, why is Dr. Christine Blasey Ford raising nearly $1 million over the past couple of days for herself? I mean, what is the purpose of that money? And some may say, well, that is Dr. Ford's payment for her testimony. If I were the interrogating attorney at that Senate Judiciary Committee, I think I would spend a lot of time on the apparent evidence that Dr. Ford is somehow being compensated for the testimony that she's delivering right there in the Senate Judiciary Committee. I think that discredits Dr. Ford and her testimony. That's an issue that I think needs to be explained and needs to be examined much more closely. She also testified that she didn't know that Senator Grassley, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, had offered to come out to California to interview her. How does she not know that? One of her main complaints about traveling to Washington, D.C. is that she was afraid to fly because of the latent effects of this alleged sexual assault from 36 years ago. So the Senate Republicans say, all right, we'll fly out to you and give you the opportunity to testify in your home or in your town, wherever it's most comfortable. She wasn't aware of that. That seems to me this is a witness who is out of touch and is perhaps not in charge of her testimony. We'll talk more about the Judge Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearings when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Mark Scaringi Show.
Now back to The Mark Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. Today we're talking about the Judge Brett Kavanaugh Senate Judiciary Committee confirmation hearings, and we're talking about, more particularly, about the testimony of Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, how a lot of Americans thought she did a good job, that she was credible, and how I have a different opinion. We'll open up the phone lines and we'll take some calls, and you're welcome to call in at 717-540-0580. 540-0580, and tell me how you think Dr. Ford did. We'll take a call from Joe from Pembroke. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show. How did Dr. Ford do on Thursday?
I agree with you, Mark. I actually think she's out of touch with her faculties. I did not believe her. I thought Kavanaugh's speech at the end was very, very eloquent. I find it confounding that the Republican Party still is cowherded by the Democrats. I understand how important this subject is to all women and men. However, I just find her to be totally untruthful, and I just can't understand why they allow themselves to be pushed and pushed and pushed around. No due process, no witnesses. As you've already stated, her testimony was completely full of holes. If that were me, Mark, I don't know what you would do to me as an attorney, but as an American citizen, I am confounded, confused, and saddened. But thank you very much for allowing me on the show. Have a great day.
Joe from Pembroke, thanks for calling. Appreciate having the benefit of your views, and I do certainly agree with the concerns that you have addressed. Rachel Mitchell was the prosecutor chosen by the Senate Republicans to conduct the examination of Dr. Ford. The stated reason, the unstated reason was the senators, all of whom are male on the Republican side, were very worried about the appearance of men examining, interrogating, interviewing a female witness about an alleged sexual assault that she was on the receiving end of by a male perpetrator. And so for appearance's sake, they deferred to a female attorney, a prosecutor of sexual assault cases from Maricopa County, Arizona. They brought in to do the job. And I think that prosecutor didn't do a great job. First of all, the setting, I think, was not helpful at all. It was not conducive to elucidating the truth and to getting all of the facts out on the table. She only had 5 minutes to conduct each part of her interrogation of the witness, and then as she's trying to develop of the testimony and trying to develop a rapport and a back and forth with the witness she's interrogating, all of a sudden the clock strikes and she's got to stop in the middle of her questioning. It was absurd, really. The structure of the hearing was not designed to allow the prosecutor to truly do a deep dive into the testimony of this witness, and it left a lot to be desired. We'll talk more about that. I want to open up the phone booth here. We have Carmen. Carmen, you're on the Mark Scaringi Show. How do you think Dr. Ford did on Thursday?
I don't believe anything that she said. I can tell in the tone of her voice that she was changing too much, and then normal, and like she was trying to, act, but it didn't convince me. Thank you.
Well, Carmen, thanks for calling. And so Carmen was not convinced by the testimony of Dr. Ford. I think there were many others who were not convinced by her testimony. I certainly would fall in that camp, and I'm interested to know what my listeners think. You can call in 717-540-0580, 717-540-0580. We're talking about the Judge Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearing on Thursday, the testimony of Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. We're focusing right now on the prosecutor retained by the Senate Republicans, this Rachel Mitchell from Arizona, and the structure she was given made it very difficult for her. So she starts out with one arm tied behind her back. She only has 5 minutes for each segment before she's got to turn the questioning over to a Democratic senator who was sympathetic with the victim and accusatory of Judge Kavanaugh. That just boggles the mind that that's the way this hearing was structured. So you had a couple of minutes of a prosecutor actually asking pertinent, relevant questions of the witness, and then she's cut off, and you have a Democratic senator then start talking about himself or herself and just start articulating all these political messages and political posturing and pontificating that completely distracts from the purpose of the hearing, which was to elucidate the truth, to get at the truth. So the whole setup to me was not designed in such a way that would get at the truth really from either side. We'll open up the phone banks and we'll take some more calls. People are interested and they want to contribute to this discussion, and we're talking about the judicial confirmation hearings of Judge Kavanaugh and the performance of Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. Scott from Lebanon, you're on the Mark Scaringi Show. How do you think Judge Ford did?
I'll tell Mark, my comment, and it is in reference here to Dr. Ford, and we needed to have her be heard. She needed to, come forth and be heard, and I understand that. What I'm having a real issue with here in the last 48 hours is tonight in State College, you have Ohio State and Penn State playing a big college football game, and you have an Ohio State coach who's just been reinstated from suspension by his university for withholding information on a domestic abuse assault case, so on and so forth. So he's investigated, he's put on suspension, he comes back, I guess last week or today. Now we have Senator Feinstein needs to resign. Senator Bob Casey needs to make a statement about the ranking member on the Democratic side of the Judiciary Committee about how she handled the information that she was given in July, 60 days ago. And she, as far as the anonymous letter, she, in respect to Senator Grassley, her and Senator Grassley are ranking members or a closed-door session, could have investigated this or had this investigated back in July. We went through a conversation a couple weeks ago on the Catholic Church, the diocese and the Catholic Church here in Pennsylvania. Millions of dollars have been spent. Investigations, as should be the case, as far as the investigation with the Attorney General Shapiro, and it needs to be done, and it is being done. But how does Senator Dianne Feinstein get away with this? And it's just incredible, Mark. And I know you had run for the Senate, and as far as with politics over the years, but you need to break this down. This is unbelievable. I cannot believe the United States and everything else that has taken place in the state of Pennsylvania in college football with an Ohio State coach that just gets it reinstated for withholding information. You're talking about a nominee for the United States Supreme Court, and she has this information in July, and we're having this conversation this week. She needs to resign. She needs to resign from the Senate. She needs to resign. If nothing else, they need to remove her from the Judiciary Committee. And as far as Senator Flake, I got to make one more comment. I've been out to the Flight 93 Memorial, and I look at what those passengers on Flight 93 did to take down a plane to save the lives of hundreds, if not thousands of people, wherever that flight was heading to in Washington, D.C. And courageous men and women took down that flight in a farm field in southwestern Pennsylvania, and Senator Flake cannot stand up to his senators, the pompous people they are on the other side of the aisle, while they're tearing down the character and the career of an innocent man. It's astounding, simply astounding. I cannot believe it. That's all I have to say, Mark. Thanks for your show.
Well, Scott from Lebanon, thanks for calling. Appreciate your views. We'll talk about Senator Dianne Feinstein, the ranking member, about her participation. I'll give you my thoughts on her, but I want to take one more call before we go to a commercial break. It looks like Steve Bannon. I'm not sure this is actually Steve Bannon, but Steve, what do you think about Dr. Ford's testimony?
Yes, slight correction. Steve from Lebanon.
Okay, got it. Go ahead.
Sure, no problem. The voting bloc, how the Democrats stick together, they are not going to believe any nominee for the Supreme Court the Republicans put up. They'll believe any witness that is brought before that person against them. And the Republicans are fractured. They're not going to stick together. They may or may not vote their conscience, but conscience doesn't matter to the other side. It's automatic, the way they operate. And just one quick thing. I don't know if you saw it or other people did, but on Fox News, it was scrolling across the bottom as I was watching the news on the hearings. Two people contacted Grassley, said they were the ones involved in the incident with Dr. Ford. And that only came across one time, and I've not heard that mentioned anywhere else or expanded upon. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, Steve from Lebanon, thanks. And we had Scott from Lebanon and Steve from Lebanon. We're getting lots of calls from Lebanon County today. So that wasn't Steve Bannon, the former campaign chairman of the Trump campaign. That's a fascinating fact that we had two witnesses come forward on the morning of or the night before the confirmation hearing on Thursday, asserting that it was they who were the men who the men who sexually assaulted Christine Blasey Ford. Yet I don't recall hearing anything about that during the hearing. I think there is a good chance that if, in fact, Dr. Ford was sexually assaulted, or there was an attempt to sexually assault her 36 some years ago, it may not have been Judge Brett Kavanaugh, a man who she did not know. And perhaps she is, through her therapy some 30 years later, is recollecting or recalling some other event. But that wasn't really explored by the prosecutor retained by the Senate Republicans. That's a whole other aspect of this hearing that was largely ignored. I would have loved to have seen some cross-examination of this whole idea of memory recollection and lapsed memory. We'll talk more about the Judge Kavanaugh confirmation hearings when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Mark Scaringi Show.
Now, more of Mark Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we're trying to get to the bottom of the Dr. Christine Blasey Ford allegation against Judge Brett Kavanaugh. Did he or did he not sexually assault this woman when she was a young girl, 15 years of age, 36 some years ago? We didn't learn that on Thursday during the Senate Judiciary Committee hearings. I'm not even sure the hearings were designed to make that determination. As we were talking about, the format of the hearing really wasn't conducive to getting at the truth. It's unfortunate that it was structured in the way it was, with these impossible 5-minute segments with the constant interruptions. The prosecutor examining the witnesses couldn't develop a line of inquiry. They couldn't set up the witnesses. But I'm not in the camp of those who are championing the prosecutor. I don't think she did a very good job. She failed to hone in on the alleged sexual assault itself. She allowed Dr. Christine Blasey Ford to testify as to what occurred in that bedroom, and then said that she wasn't going to question her about that. Hands off. Now, that is mind-boggling to me. Now, in my earlier life, I did a lot of criminal defense work, and that is the most important part of the cross-examination, when you have the accuser on the stand and she's giving a vague narrative about what occurred. It's your job to ask the questions that are designed to get out all of the facts about what occurred. But we know very little about what occurred in that bedroom. There was no real cross-examination. The prosecutor said, hands off, I'm not going to go there. You're not going to go there? That's the whole thing. That's the alleged crime. We're not going to talk about the alleged crime. That's what our prosecutor does for us in the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. That to me is absolutely remarkable and regrettable. But in any event, there were other parts of the questioning that were just not good. Now she did do some good, the prosecutor that is, in that she got Ford to state that she didn't know how she got to the house and she didn't know how she got home from the house, and she had that lovely map. The prosecutor did a good job with the map, showing it was 8 miles from I think from the country club to Dr. Ford's home, her parents' home at the time, and that was as the crow flies. So how is it that Dr. Ford did not recall how she got to the home where the alleged sexual assault occurred, and then doesn't recall how she got home, which was many, many miles? I mean, did she not remember whether she walked home for miles and miles after this alleged sexual assault? Did she hitchhike? Did she call a cab? I mean, these are questions that must be asked, but were not. There was no follow-up by the prosecutor, but at least the prosecutor got out the point that the accuser just didn't know how she got there and how she got home. She wasn't drunk. She testified she only had 1 beer. But in any event, another part of the questioning by the prosecutor, which I thought was good, got out the fact that Dr. Christine Blasey Ford was, to put it nicely, telling a big fib that she has some fear of flying because of these alleged latent effects of the alleged sexual assault from 36 years ago. But she flies all over the country for vacations, for hobbies. I mean, to Hawaii, to faraway locations across the Pacific Ocean to pursue hobbies. I mean, who does that? I mean, if you're a listener, call in 717-540-0580 and tell me about how you fly across the Pacific Ocean for your hobbies. I mean, that's just and no follow-up. I mean, where are the questions? And how about the fact that apparently Dr. Christine Blasey Ford was in the Washington, D.C. area for the week prior to the hearing? That's where she was, obviously preparing with her attorneys for this testimony, yet says that she has a fear of flying from California to D.C., and that's why she couldn't be there last Monday. I mean, there are just huge, gaping holes in her credibility that were just not pursued by the prosecutor, Rachel Mitchell. But those are just my opinions, by the way. I could be wrong. I'm interested to know if you think I'm wrong. Call in 717-540-0580, 717-540-0580. And then yesterday, Friday, we saw more political drama playing itself out in the United States Senate. We had United States Senator Jeffrey Flake of Arizona, who gets the nickname that he's a little flaky. Apparently, there's good reason for it. He has been a never Trumper, and in fact will not run for re-election, which is why there's there are 2 open Senate seats in Arizona. But he is just a flake, and he did a flake flip. The Thursday night, he was meeting with Senator Collins, Senator Murkowski, and Senator Manchin of West Virginia. Now, Collins and Murkowski are, of course, both Republicans, both Republican women, the only 2 Republican women on the Senate Judiciary Committee, so their votes were critical, and they were both very concerned about the appearance of a female senator voting in favor of an accused sexual assaulter or an accused attempted rapist. So Jeffrey Flake, Senator Flake, was communicating with those senators, and they were trying to design a strategy by which they could move forward in a way that they thought that they could be comfortable with. And so it was Friday afternoon when Senator Jeff Flake announced that he would, in fact, vote for the Kavanaugh nomination and voted out of committee and let it get to the floor. However, on his way to the Senate committee hearing for the vote, he was confronted in the elevator by an angry woman, Ana Maria Archila, 39 years of age. She confronted Senator Flake as he was standing in that tiny elevator, and you've got to YouTube this and watch the video. He's trying to use the elevator, but this angry woman and her friend, they were standing in the doorway, stopping him and confining him into this small space. And they were screaming at him that they were sexual assault survivors. And this Ana Maria Archila screamed, "Don't look away from me. Look at me and tell me that it doesn't matter what happened to me, that you will let people like that go on to the highest court of the land." Now, so here is poor Jeffrey Flake flaking out and not saying a thing because he's petrified. But it turns out Archila is the co-executive director of the Center for Popular Democracy, which is a New York-based nonprofit group, an extreme left-wing group that is partially funded by George Soros. And this Archila she's a self-identified LGBT immigrant advocate. She's attacked Trump's zero-tolerance policy on immigration. She wants to abolish ICE. She's denounced Trump for his apparent inadequate response to the people of Puerto Rico because of Hurricane Maria. She fights for racial and social economic justice. She is a social justice warrior funded by George Soros, who puts her foot in the door of the elevator, entrapping a U.S. senator in the elevator while she accosts him, screams at him that she's a sexual assault survivor, and he better not vote to confirm another sexual assault survivor. I mean, this is the worst kind of politics. But before I continue, we've got lots of phone calls, so I want to open up the phone lines, and we'll take Mike from Carlisle. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show. How do you think Judge Ford did?
Oh, that's garbage. Well, my wife always catches on to when women are using their baby voice. You know, her the whole way through, and you know what I'm saying, I hope. But yeah, whenever it's, well, and then I went here, and then I did it. You know, I don't believe for a minute that that's her normal talking voice. And the story about the two doors on the house, I was rolling on the floor laughing. That's the silliest thing I ever heard of. I don't believe 90% of it. Did something happen? Maybe, but I think that doggone it, we all know. Here's an example, and people say, "Oh, there's no comparison," but you know where you were on 9/11. And that was a pretty horrendous day. And I was at work, and I was doing other things, and I know exactly where I was and exactly what was going on that day.
Well, Mike,
so don't tell me something like that happened, and you can't even say what house you were in? Baloney.
Mike from Carlisle, well said. I'm sorry, I've got to cut you a little short. I've got to take a quick commercial break. You're listening to the Mark Scaringi Show. Stay tuned. We'll be back right after this.
Now back to the Mark Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day. We're talking about the confirmation hearings of Judge Brett Kavanaugh on Thursday. We're focusing on the testimony of Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. And I'm interested to know what my listeners think. How did she do? Was she credible or was she incredible? Not credible, that is. Lots of course, the media are all in agreement that she did a terrific job, extremely credible, and Judge Brett Kavanaugh is a rapist. Well, let's hear what my listeners think. Call in 717-540-0580. We'll talk to Gene from Mechanicsburg. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show. How did Dr. Ford do?
It's Jean from Mechanicsburg.
Yes, go ahead, Gene. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
First, I want to bring up your statement about the two men that came forward. I did hear them address that, but not in the hearing. I think it was Lindsey Graham interviewed. And unlike the Democrats, who, if the roles were reversed, two men came forward, it wouldn't matter how ridiculous their story, they have been promoting them. They very, very quickly investigated these guys, interviewed them, and found neither one to be even remotely credible, and said they were complete flakes. That's why they didn't introduce them.
Okay, yeah, I thought that was that was a little far-fetched. As we know, whenever there is a high-profile crime or criminal case, you get strange people who come out of the woodwork, and because they want fame and celebrity, they say that they were the ones who did it. What's the other point you wanted to make?
Okay. Just to give you background, because what I see breakdowns of people taking sides. Everybody who their brain is stacked so they think emotionally but don't hone in on facts are siding with her. Anybody who's very analytical and looks at it sees the lies, the gaping holes, the whole works, and realizes this is a fraud. My background, so you'll know, because you would automatically think that I would be sympathetic with her, and I went in watching, absolutely neutral, because I like what Trump's achieved. I can't stand his mouth. I would love to be able to edit the man, so I'm not a raving fan of his, but I'll give him credit where credit is due. I have been assaulted multiple times. I have sat through hours and hours of women in groups discussing this. I also know over 24 women who have falsely, legally accused men, knowingly that they falsely accused them, and went through court proceedings accusing men of assault and or sexual crimes. I know what both of them look like very intimately. I am amazed at the women with the false accusations. They gleefully enjoy every minute of it. They do use the baby voice. You never see a woman with a baby voice in any of these circles where they're talking about their actual offenses. But I picked up at least 5 lies that she told. One of them, of course, is the flying thing. Second one, she didn't know that they would come to her. Well, if that's the case, she's the only person in America who didn't know they would come to her. Did you pick up on the phrase she used repeatedly over and over? I watched it 3 times because I watched it live, and then I watched it repeatedly over the internet because I wanted to make sure that I was not mistaking or mishearing anything. Did you pick up on the phrase that she responded to the questions with over and over and over again when she did not want to have to answer until her attorneys leaned over and whispered to her before she would respond? Hello?
Jane from Mechanicsburg, what is that phrase that she was using over and over again?
I don't understand the question.
Well, you're talking about Dr. Christine Ford was using a certain phrase over and over again, and
she wasn't sure if her attorneys would want her to answer it or how they would want her to answer it.
I see. And
she used that repeatedly, and every time the questions were extremely simple, anybody could understand them, and her phrase was, "I don't understand the question." They would repeat the question. She would say again, "I don't understand the question," and this would continue until her attorneys leaned over and whispered in her ear. Then she responded.
Yeah, she certainly seemed out of it at times, and I did notice kind of the laughing and the giggling, the childlike voice. That was all off-putting to me. What were some of the other factors?
That's not just off-putting. That is something that actual victims of these kind of crimes don't talk like that. I've never heard one, and I have listened to hundreds. But every single one of the women that I've seen falsely accuse men, when they had to publicly state it to get the charges made or in court, they went into this helpless baby-fied thing like, "Oh, poor me, you need to rescue me." And unfortunately, male judges consistently fall for it. They feel like they need to defend women, and this poor woman so traumatized. This woman, she's not a victim of the Democrats. She's in on the whole darn scam.
So you think she's part of this conspiracy to derail Judge Kavanaugh's nomination?
The writing of the letter, the timing of the letter. Now, you have to consider the fact she had her therapist notes enclosed with her letter. There's a therapist on the planet who gives their client their notes. I know hundreds of psychologists, psychiatrists. Are you aware of the fact that to get a degree in that field, you have to undergo at least a year of very intensive psychotherapy? That psychotherapy will take you through the earliest memories of your life, straight on through, and will particularly focus on your sexual attitudes and sexual experiences. So either she lied to a therapist when she went through it and never said anything, because she testified under oath that she never told a therapist ever about the incident until 2012. So either she lied when she went through therapy, which doesn't give her a lot of credibility, or she lied about never having to told any other therapist, or she just simply fabricated this.
Well, those are some pretty trenchant points and analysis that you're making, Gene, from Mechanicsburg. I appreciate it. I wish I could have more time with you because you're providing some amazing insights, but thank you for calling.
Can I mention one other thing that's a total giveaway? I've seen two of her relatives interviewed on TV. Do you know how all of her relatives, including siblings, etc., found out about this?
No. How did they find out about this?
Through the media.
Yeah, that is just...
and not only that, she's had no communication by phone. The only thing she'll do is text her own relatives. That means they're keeping her hidden, so she can't reveal anything that anybody can get to anybody in interviews to disprove her. If you've actually been through this, if you're ever going to talk to anybody, you're going to talk to a very close relative, not beach friends who they asked her the names of them, and she said they're just beach friends. I don't know their names. You don't take the advice of somebody you don't know when you've been through this. I mean, it's just riddled with holes from top to bottom. She is not in any way, shape, or form credible at all, unless you have some reason that you just want to side against Trump.
Wow, very well said, Gene from Mechanicsburg. Thank you so much for calling. Appreciate hearing
my call.
Your views. Very, very well done. Wow, we ought to have her on the show, and she's really broken this down for us and given us a real...
I've gotten 5 notes that I've written down from watching this interview, and everything I know. I'll also say this. She has had the best possible therapy available to her for over 30 years. Therapy empowers you. Okay? So with what we saw there, does she look like an empowered woman?
Not at all. She looks like she was being led around by her powerful attorneys and the Senate Democrats.
Yeah. So either this is proof that that entire field is a complete fraud, or she's the fraud. You pick it.
Wow. Well, thank you, Gene. Appreciate that. I've got to take some more calls here. Bill from Gettysburg, you're on the Mark Scaringi Show. How do you think Dr. Christine Blasey Ford did at the Senate Judiciary Committee hearings on Thursday?
Well, let me first say I did not see that. I'm just going by the media reports. But I have a question. The prosecutor that was asking the question, did she ever ask Ms. Ford how she knew Judge Kavanaugh and how she remembered after almost 40 years that it was him that did that? And what was their relationship, if all? And there was a lot of stringent points that did not come across to make her look like she was lying.
Yeah, great question. And no, the prosecutor did not ask Dr. Christine Blasey Ford how she came to know Brett Kavanaugh and did not ask her subsequent to the alleged incident. Did she ever see Judge Kavanaugh again? Did she ever meet Brett Kavanaugh? Did she ever speak to Brett Kavanaugh? So the whole part of Christine Blasey Ford's credibility focuses on her recollection of the event, and there's an entire part of this that's focusing on maybe it's a case of mistaken identity, and that has been a big part of the Republican defense of Brett Kavanaugh. Yet the prosecutor they hired did not ask those critical questions that you, as the listener, you obviously want to know that. I want to know that, but those questions weren't asked, which is another reason I think that justifies my opinion that the prosecutor really failed the job.
Yeah, and even when she was questioning the judge, I mean, the senators had to come in and take her off the slate because she wasn't getting anywhere with her questions with him neither to actually try and prove his case. So to me, she was more like she was working for the Democrats than she was for the Republicans. And this Jeff Flake thing, when I saw that, and this, I'm sure placed by the Democrats, this lady that was giving him a fit, he totally caved. And, as per usual, the Republicans got it handed to them by the Democrats, once again.
Yeah, Bill from Gettysburg, thanks for calling. Appreciate those thoughts. And I agree. I think the Republicans got it handed to them. They bent over backwards to accommodate the demands of Judge Christine Blasey Ford, really her attorneys and Senate Democrats who were obviously running the show. And you do feel sorry for this, for Dr. Ford. What she looked like, she was not in charge of herself, not in charge of her own testimony, and not in charge of her own fate. She's been swept up into this whirlwind, used as a tool by Senate Democrats who will do anything in their power to destroy the nomination of Judge Brett Kavanaugh because he is the swing vote. He's got the Anthony Kennedy seat, and they know that so much of the future of our country is at stake on this particular nomination. And they've pulled out all of the stops. They announced prior to the selection of Judge Kavanaugh that they will do everything in their power to derail this nomination. That's about all the time we have today. You've been listening to the Mark Scaringi Show. We're here on WHP 580 and iHeartRadio every Saturday from 1 to 2. We're also on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live, so you can call in or you can write in. And we'll get your thoughts and views out there on the air. And we'll continue our fight to restore freedom to America. Thank you. That's all the time we have this week. Thanks for listening.